Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast with Nazca Fontes.
Welcome to All Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast. I'm so glad you're here today. I have to tell you, I'm sitting at my desk and the sun is shining, and I'm really, really glad that this podcast is not a video format. You know, as I sit here in my quiet space, so excited for today's guest and thinking about the discussion we're going to have, it's not so far across the room that I can see a teeny tiny mirror. And luckily, I didn't have Zooms this morning either, but I swim oftentimes in the morning. And as we get to a certain age, we all discover that those of us who like to swim, those goggle marks just don't go away. So on today's podcast, I'm forever grateful that I'm just a voice behind the microphone and there's no Zoom, and my skin will have all the time in the world to bounce back in the next 72 hours. So without further ado, let's talk about our next guest. One of the most important relationships that women have in their lives is their connection to their OB-GYN. Women have tough conversations, they have silly conversations, they have scary conversations, and it really is such an important role that OB-GYNs play in the arc of a woman's life. And what I really like to think about when we talk about surrogacy and in connection to an OB-GYN is how that relationship is so important and how meaningful. So on the show today, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Heather Carlson with the Mankato Clinic, which is a network clinic of the Mayo Healthcare System, who has delivered many of conceivability sero babies and has an awesome experience caring for those surrogates. She's a mom, she's a doctor, and she also finds spare time for her fur baby and enjoying the Minnesota outdoors. Welcome, Dr. Carlson. I'm so excited that you're here.
Hi.
I know that you've been an OB-GYN for 15 years, and I'd love to hear about your journey to become a doctor and when you really decided that that was the profession for you.
Yeah, I started my medical school training in 2001. Gosh, right before 9/11, so that was interesting. And then our traditional medical school, your third and fourth years, you do rotations. And in my third year, OB-GYN is a typical rotation. And I'll be honest, I wasn't particularly interested in it going into it. I guess I didn't really know what the field involved. But as I was doing the rotation, I found myself staying late, doing extra call, really enjoying the relationships that you would build with the patients, seeing them through the pregnancy, deliver them, hand that baby over, and it was just a fun thing. And so then I started to do more rotations and to do more training in it, and that's when I decided.
Well, I think what was really remarkable about your particular profile is that you are actually servicing patients in the very clinic in which you were born. So you are a patient at your clinic.
Yeah.
I think very few practitioners can say that. So you
Right.
came back to your hometown roots to care for the patient population there. And so you've been doing this now for 15 years. Can you point to some of the more rewarding experiences that you've had in your 15 years in practice?
It's just kind of some more general things. I mean, you really do get to know your patients. I mean, obviously I have some patients that I went to high school with or I babysat for. It's kind of crazy. But just as rewarding are the ones that I meet just starting in practice. And then, you know, you see girls in college and we do birth control or annual exams and get to know them, and then they're engaged and married, and then they come in and pregnant, and it's just kind of fun to see get to know people through all their different stages in life, and then see them become mothers, or, you know, well, actually, most of my patients are mothers before they're surrogates, I would say, and then just watching and being a part of all those people's lives through those different stages. That's my most rewarding thing. It's also really fun. I do have more than just fur babies now. And so watching my kids play with kids I've delivered, and, you know, it's just kind of fun to get to know some of the babies that I've delivered through my own kids.
Sure, in your own backyard, in your own village, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how
Yep.
remarkable is that? And
Yeah.
I would agree with you. You know, the life cycle, the reproductive life cycle of a woman is, you know, a fairly complex one. She changes quite a bit from the time she enters puberty, goes through, you know, high school years, and then develops into a woman, and you know, those changes and complexities all the way through to menopause and beyond are always shifting and complicated. So for you to be there from the very beginning, that is a very strong patient-doctor relationship, and really one of the most, I think, you know, one of the most profound relationships in healthcare. It just needs to be on a very strong foundation of trust. And what we've come to find at Conceivabilities is when a woman is considering becoming a gestational surrogate, you know, one of the first people that she talks to outside of her spouse or her partner is her doctor. It is her OBGYN. There's such a strong bond of trust there. So, you know, when you think about how you might counsel or have counseled your patients who come to you and want to discuss surrogacy, you know, what are some of the things that you really want to perhaps inspire within them? And then what are some of the things that might be more of a cautionary tale?
You know, I feel like most of my patients that have come to me have done a lot of research. And I think the clinics do a really nice job of giving them, you know, I honestly don't know if it's a packet or just a website that they're reading through, but they seem pretty well versed on the subject a lot of times before they bring it up to me. So we just talk about the different health issues that can occur. Again, like I've said, most of my patients have already been mothers before they've, you know, considered surrogacy. So that's very helpful because we can kind of review their pregnancies, review any issues that would have occurred and maybe would occur again. And we talk about different issues that could occur. And then I tend to know my patients fairly well, and so we, you know, I think the mental aspect of it is a very important one, and we talk about that too, different considerations and how they would deal with the emotional aspect of being a carrier.
Can you, for our listeners, can you point to maybe one or two considerations that you think are kind of at the forefront of everybody's mind, or at even your mind?
Everyone obviously considers how would they feel like giving this baby up. They're very well aware it's not their baby, but just how would they feel feeling that baby grow inside of them and then giving that up. And so I think most people have already kind of went through that process before they've talked to me. But I do, we talk about, and as I've done this more, we talk about a little bit more, because I've learned as well that, like, how are they going to feel? Obviously it's their body, but their body's kind of on rent. I don't know how to say it better. And a lot of the medical decision making isn't going to be solely based on their wishes necessarily. It's definitely a conversation between them and the biological parents, and how are they going to deal with that aspect. Some patients are not going to deal with that as well because they're very much independent in that, and other people are better at kind of compartmentalizing that decision, and this isn't, you know, this is a surrogacy decision and versus one that they would make if they were pregnant with their own child.
Right. So, you know, not only are you caring for a surrogate who is your patient, right? She's your patient, but then
Right.
there's this, you know, there's this other set of considerations on behalf of intended parents. And when you're caring for a surrogate, how do you communicate with intended parents? It's a sensitive undertaking. So how do you do it best?
Yeah. I try my hardest. I think it's different with every, it's just different with every single pregnancy. Sometimes the parents are more local. I just did a delivery. They live in China, and but they're from Europe, and so they would call from different countries at 3 a.m. and we would FaceTime and talk about. But this is all via my patient's phone, so she has given all of her consent to the conversation, and we. But me and my patient will talk about what they want me to talk about first before I would ever say anything with the biological parents, because I don't want to, I don't want to lose their trust at all. Plus, that's just how that needs to be done. I've had others where they come to the appointments frequently, and then frankly, that's the easiest because they can ask questions and I answer them directly. Currently, with COVID, we do a lot of phone calls or FaceTime, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, it's so interesting because it's a very unique and unusual role for a physician to play, right? This intermediary, if you will, and it's not easy, and there can be conflicting points of view on care sometimes. So I don't envy that role at all in an OBGYN caring for a surrogate pregnancy. But just to remind the listeners too that really the surrogate, she is your patient. And that's your primary focus. So let's back up just a second. And just to confirm, for those listeners who don't know a lot about surrogacy and are just curious, can you confirm for our listeners that surrogates really are gestational carriers who have no genetic connection to the babies they carry?
Absolutely. This is not. They are just carrying the pregnancy. I shouldn't say just, because it's an amazing thing that they're doing, and it's not always easy, but they are not the biological parent at all. So the baby was created and then placed into them.
Into the surrogate, right? She's just a carrier, and a wonderful one at that. Can you remember, Dr. Carlson, the first time you got connected to the concept of surrogacy? Was it prior to medical school? Was it in medical school? Was it just, pop culture? But when you first thought about it and were introduced to it, and I would love to know how you now look at it through the lens of being a healthcare provider.
I'm pretty sure it was just during my OB rotation, and they said surrogate, and I was like, what is that? I hadn't heard of that. And the physician just explained how that works to me, and I was like, oh, okay. And I just, at the time I probably thought of it more as someone who is giving their baby up for adoption. As I go through it more, clearly that is not the situation, and I think my patients and the surrogacy clinics do a really nice job of making sure no one feels like it's their child that they're giving up. They definitely are aware and emotionally prepared that they are just carrying the baby. And so I just think it's a really unique situation, and what a great gift to give to someone. So I think it's really beautiful now.
Well, those of us who practice in this field, we are all about modern family building. And I read that one of your favorite parts of being a doctor, I believe, was one of your YouTube videos with your children, which was just simply adorable.
Oh, thanks. The
both of your kids were the
children.
stars.
Yes, I am aware. That's why I did it.
One of your favorite parts of being a doctor is really helping build families. And so how does it feel to have a career that focuses on the mission and gets to incorporate something that's so, kind of modern and cutting edge like surrogacy?
It's great. That's what I love to do. That's why I went into this. I think it's even more important to me now, and I feel more strongly about it now that I have my own children. It's even, I guess, more special that I am a part of this whole process in families' lives, and getting to be a part of that moment. I think everyone who does have children remembers the first time they saw their baby on a ultrasound, or certainly remembers their baby being born. And it's really an honor to be trusted in those situations and to be a part of that situation. So that's why I went into OBGYN. So
I think that you have such a unique front row view, literally, in this process. When you get to deliver one of your surrogates and see that child being placed into the arms of the intended parent, can you share, some of those experiences or some of those moments for our listeners? Because that's really where all of the hard work that we do and all of the care that we put in really comes to fruition, right? That's the joyful zenith of all of this. And I would love to hear some of your experiences there.
Yeah. I just had the greatest delivery over the summer, and the couple were from Europe, and through lots of struggle made it here, which was emotional. And I think all of these situations are that much more satisfying when you do know all the backstory and you've been through it with them. So I think everyone involved in the delivery was that much more invested because it was so hard with COVID for them to get over here. And this is a married couple with two men, and so clearly couldn't conceive on their own, and but so wanted to have this baby, and they were so excited, and they were just cared so much for their surrogate. It was just beautiful. I mean, every single person in the room was crying well before the baby was born. The dads were sobbing openly and hugging the mom and thanking her, and then when that baby was born, she went right to the dad's chest, and they were just there was not a dry eye in the room. It was such a beautiful moment to see, and they cared so much for the surrogate, and they're so excited for that baby. It was just a wonderful moment. So that was one of my favorite ones recently. So but it is nice because you do know these people, and when you're part of that whole process, you know all the struggles they had trying to get pregnant or trying to have a baby, and to see them hold that baby for the first time is so special.
It really is. I think that there's nothing better. It makes all of the hard work worthwhile. And,
Mm-hmm.
for surrogates, that they come to this too, I believe, most often just fully informed, very clear thinking, really wanting to have that special experience. They work long and hard for that too, for that moment when they can hand the baby and cry those tears of joy together. And we do hear from a lot of surrogates that when they finally take the step towards surrogacy, we often hear that it's all about the right time in their lives. Like they've thought about it, they mulled it over, they discussed it, they analyzed it, they researched it, and finally they arrive at this decision and they say the time is right. And that sounds more of like an emotional point of view about the journey or the process. But from a medical point of view, if you're caring for a patient, do you have any opinion about what some issues might be to consider in terms of medical timing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I think the most important, more than timing, is just their overall health. And so, just if there are any underlying issues, talking about that and making sure that they are healthy and doing healthy lifestyle choices, and which all of my patients are, but that are surrogates, but just making sure that's all in order. And then age does play a factor. Pregnancy in general becomes riskier the older you are. Part of that is due to genetics, but a lot of it is due to the mom's own physiology, and so that part can't be sidestepped with surrogacy. And so then we talk about the risks with pregnancy, and I think that's a strong thing too, that I try to reiterate with my patients, is that just because your own pregnancies didn't have these issues, for one, you're older this time, and two, this isn't your genetic baby, so there are differences that can happen in the pregnancy, and we need to talk about those. And some of those, like blood pressure issues, blood sugar issues, preterm delivery, things like that, do become increased as you get older. And so then you need to make sure that you consider those as a possibility, and how would that affect your life, your work, your family, your kids' sports schedule, different things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you were to, if a patient of yours comes to you and says, "Hey, Dr. Carlson, I've really been thinking about being a surrogate," what advice do you have for them, and how might you encourage other women to craft the conversation with their own doctor?
I feel like most of my patients come in, they already know that they want to do it. So
Strong
they don't really talk
surrogates.
about it. I know. I feel like Are you sure? Yes. Okay. They've like, I've thought about this for years and this, and it's kind of hard to question the intent too much. So if I feel like they haven't thought about it too much, then we go into their intent and why do they want to be a surrogate. But I don't have a lot of experience in them not having thought about it very much, because most of them have thought about it for years by the time we talk about it. So then we just talk about the health point, the health issues and what can happen with pregnancy, and have they thought about that, and just kind of go from there. So.
Right. Okay.
I guess I don't have I don't have advice on how to start the conversation.
I love that. I love that, because they do. I mentioned it earlier. They are very clear thinking and very well informed. And I do think that there's this, this is a great time. Perhaps we can bust some myths, right? And one of those is some folks second guess a surrogate's intention. So in your experience, why do you think women want to become surrogates?
Because they want to help others become a mom or a family. So they can't. I feel like the comment I probably hear the most often is, it wasn't like my pregnancy was never difficult or hard for me, and I can't imagine not being able to have children. And so I feel like I would be a good person to give that to someone else, which I think is
true,
very admirable. Mm-hmm.
Another myth, some surrogates will say, I've had my tubes tied. I've heard that I can't be a surrogate. Is this true?
No. It doesn't matter, because they're not using their eggs. So as long as they have a uterus that's working, we're good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And one, of course, that we already touched upon previously, but a big myth that swirls around for folks that are really on the periphery of surrogacy and just don't know how it works. But, will the baby have any shared DNA with the surrogate mother or look like the surrogate? Let's bust this one out.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the surrogate. So, not unless the mom and the surrogate look alike. That would be the only way. So, or the dad, I guess. No, it's not genetic. It has nothing to do with the surrogate. The surrogate is merely incubating that baby for that time. So no shared DNA.
Have you ever experienced a moment in the care of any of your surrogates in delivery where she has struggled after giving birth?
I think there's a couple of different ways that women can struggle. For the most part, most of my patients have done really well with like handing the baby over. In that, whereas that's different, when I deliver someone who's giving their baby up for adoption, obviously not the same thing, but I think hormonally, those hormones are still hers, and they still go crazy after delivery. And so there's definitely some women that have struggled with, postpartum mood issues, depression probably being the main one, which, is treatable, and we talk about and we discuss before delivery and after. So it hasn't been a long struggle. And then there's been some times when there has been some medical decision making during the pregnancy. That's probably some of the biggest struggles that we have dealt with my patients, where the biological parents are wishes are different than hers. So
right, that's the tricky part, right? That's bridging the gap in communication that can really be a delicate dance.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So that's been probably the most challenging situations, with surrogacy. Not frequently. The most frequent one, and this is one I never thought about, is a lot of the intended parents or biological parents want certain things during the pregnancy or during labor, just like any first-time parents often do. Don't take any medication, especially for mood and things like that. And during delivery, want an all-natural delivery. I think every OB/GYN in the world has heard that the mom wants to try going all natural and then ends up having an epidural. We hear that frequently. Since the biological parents aren't necessarily the ones in labor, they still continue to want the all-natural birth, whereas the intended or the surrogate may want that epidural. And so that's kind of a common one that we talk about frequently. So
yes, dueling decision making at hand.
Yes.
That's also another tricky one. How about the spouse of the surrogate? What is your point of view on their ability to support their wives through this endeavor, and how involved have you seen them be in the past?
Yeah, I've only, I'm thinking about it. I've only had a couple biological parents that were man and woman. So, but always the husband has been very supportive. Like, I don't know if it's just the process that makes them or that self-selects very supportive husbands, or they've been, really amazing. And sometimes a little more, they might be doing a little of the mediation as well. I feel they're sharing in the mediation. So I think they've been, I've only had really good encounters with those people.
That's very good to hear. And if we had to ask you, Dr. Heather Carlson, practitioner OB/GYN at the Mankato Clinic, a member of the Mayo Clinic Network, if we were to ask you if you had one piece of advice for anyone considering surrogacy, what would it be?
Just think about it. I think, just ask yourself, why do I want to do this? And just think, I think probably the biggest thing that's probably difficult for people to think about is that it's not going to be the same likely as your own pregnancies. So it's worth thinking about, what if I need surgery for this? What if I develop preeclampsia and need to go on bed rest? What if I need to have a C-section? And as long as you're okay with the outcome or that process, I think it's a good, it's a great option, and you're a very good communicator, because I think communication between you and your physician, you and the biological parents, is the number one most important thing to make it a successful process for everyone, is that there's good, clear communication between everyone.
Yes, right. Well, you made some really important points along the way in today's discussion, one of them being how important the mental health aspect of this process is, and the care that needs to be provided in that vein. As an agency with, nearly 25 years of experience, I can tell you that postpartum time is a really important one. I think that there's a lot of jubilation and joy upon delivery, but the intended parents pivot, right? And they go home with that treasured child, and the surrogate has, done a magnificent thing, but she needs to heal. And she needs to heal physically, but she also needs to, take care of those hormones that are still coursing through her body, and offering a support system. And that's what an agency like Conceivability certainly does. We have postpartum care and support groups and therapists that, really look out for her during this delicate period of time. Would you recommend that everyone, whether it's a surrogate or not, just, takes advantage of any therapeutic support out there during this critical time during healing?
Absolutely. Again, I don't think anyone knows how they're going to feel, the first time you have a child. How, you have these ideas about how pregnancy, delivery, and raising a child is going to be. And then I feel like half the time that goes, all up in the air after you hold your child for the first time. And it's kind of the same, obviously not the same situation, but it's the same with this. You don't exactly know how you're going to feel afterward. And different people heal differently, and they want different things. I have some patients that enjoy and really do best with continued communication with the the biological parents, and I have other patients that really want that line drawn and the page turned and end of that, situation. And both, my different patients feeling different ways wouldn't do as well if they hadn't thought about it and talked about it and spoken to people about that and communicated that with the biological parents. And so I think that's very, very key. And then just all the other hormones and feelings, and more help is always better than less, for sure.
And Dr. Carlson, finally, after all of your years of being in practice, all the patients that you spend time with, all the good conversations, all the difficult conversations, all the people that you have come to know, if you think about surrogacy and the conversation that we've had today, and you reflect on your practice, what is your big aha moment when it comes to surrogacy?
I think, especially during these times, all of us are more convinced than ever the importance of family and close relationships, and there's really no better gift than to be able to help someone or give someone the opportunity to have a child and build their family. And I think that's the most wonderful gift that anyone could do, and it's just such a great opportunity that's available for people nowadays.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Heather Carlson, OBGYN, Mankato Clinic, a member of the Mayo Clinic Network, surrogacy doctor extraordinaire. Thank you so much for your time with me today. I know that our listeners are going to benefit greatly from your wisdom and perspective, so I really appreciate this so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
And if surrogates, potential surrogates, intended parents, if you're listening, this is the doctor to see. What a wonderful conversation with Dr. Carlson. It was such an honor and a privilege to have her with me today talking about the medical care of surrogates. And, what's so interesting is that, we've done a lot of research over, a pretty long period of time. And what we've come to understand with our surrogate community is that the trust and the support of their OBGYN is paramount to a good experience. There's so many moving pieces and parts in a surrogacy journey, and a lot of new and different people coming into the process. And the fact that a surrogate can pivot and still have the support of one of her most trusted advisors in her life really sets the tone for a positive experience. And I love that Dr. Carlson even said, so many of them come to me. So many of my patients are already so well informed. They don't have a lot of questions. They just want to know that I'm going to be there, that I'm going to support them, that they are my patient. And that is key to the process, that even with all of these folks involved in a surrogacy journey and, these hopeful and joyful intended parents, the bond between the surrogate and her doctor is really paramount, and it does set the tone for a positive journey. So I hope our listeners got a sense that surrogacy is medically safe, that it is something that OBGYNs support and acknowledge as a wonderful, beautiful thing that other women can do, and that they feel very optimistic and reassured that they're going to get top-notch medical care from their trusted doctor all the way through. Before I go, I want to share a very exciting development for Conceivabilities. If you would like to head over to the Surrogacy Learning Center.conceivabilities.com, we have a brand new community that is all about surrogacy. Thank you for joining All Things Conceivable, a surrogacy podcast hosted by Naska Fontes. Hey, that's me. Thanks, guys.
At Conceivabilities, we believe that everyone who wants to become a parent can. Our agency has helped build thousands of families for nearly 25 years. Whether you are an intended parent ready to fulfill your family destiny, a surrogate answering your calling, or an egg donor wanting to expand what's possible in your life, we are your people. See how matching matters. Learn more by joining our Surrogacy Learning Center community at surrogacylearningcenter.conceivabilities.com.